Yan! Hello mga kameta! Kamusta kayo dyan? Kamusta kayo dyan? I think nagkaroon tayo ng konting fake news kanina. Hindi naman fake news. Hindi yung pinost ko about yung meta natin about Lenny sa book launch. That was supposed to be for yesterday mga kameta. I don't know ano nangyari dyan. Baka nagkaroon ng delay or glitch yan. So yun po yung announcement for yesterday. Pero dahil mahal na mahal ko kayo, sabi ko ihabol natin ng konting medyo short lang, no drama, no, you know, ang tawag dyan. Wala na, sabaw na. Ang haba ng araw. Hinabol pa natin habang may mga free, studio makeup pa tayo. Sabi ko, mag-meta tayo bago tayo matulog. Ano na mga kumeta, I wanted to say actually pump and pageantry, despite, no pump and pageantry, no graphics, and I'm just gonna throw some ideas there. Anyway, of course, kahapon mga kameta, pinag-usapan natin, kagabi, pinag-usapan natin itong bagong libro ni Ma'am Lenny Robredo. I still have to get a copy of this, mga kameta. Boom! Ayan, first daw si Treble. Kailangan natin gumawa ng copy, so wala pa tayong copy. So I cannot talk about its laman. Mamaya natin pag-usapan yung laman niya once we get a copy of that. Hello din kay Demian R. joining us from Canada. Thank you very much sa mga kameta. Gabing-gabi na dito sa Pilipinas pero humabol pa rin tayo. So, shoutout doon sa mga kameta natin joining us from all across the world. No, actually, bago pa ako matulog, kailangan ko pa ihabol isa pong article. At ito yung ukol doon sa ASEAN. Kakatapos yung ASEAN Meeting Association of Southeast Asian Meetings dyan sa Jakarta, Indonesia. Kaninang hapon lang mga kameta dito sa Manila, Jakarta time. That was quite an important meeting because doon nakita natin na mga kameta yung ating Pangulo, in fairness to Marcos Jr., not only did he assert yung West Philippine Sea issue as an important regional concern, but the other thing he did, mga kameta, was also to call on the ASEAN region to have a more cohesive and decisive response dun sa mga iba't ibang problema sa ating rehiyon. As you know, mga kameta, of course, the ASEAN Association of Southeast Asian Nations is dealing with a lot of problems, a lot of crises, mga kameta. Kasama dyan yung, of course, yung situation sa Myanmar na lalong lumalala. Wala pa rin consensus. Obviously, hindi ka magkaroon ng consensus because obviously yung gobyerno dyan sa, not only in Myanmar, pero dyan sa Thailand na junta government din, hindi papayag dun sa decisive actions against the Myanmar government because there calls, mga kameta, for even expulsion of Myanmar from the ASEAN region. There was no agreement on that, but President Jokowi and Prime Minister Anwar made very strong statements about the lack of decisive action on that and the need for doing something important on that front. Nagkaroon din ng consensus at least dun sa pangangailangan or at least some sort of blueprint for East Timor to be part of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So there's at least something on that front, mga kameta. Now, this is important because, as you may know, East Timor used to be part of Indonesia. At least Indonesia claimed that East Timor was part of them. Obviously, it was part of the Portuguese colony, and then once Portugal left Indonesia, the war of colonization there. So for Indonesia to welcome membership of East Timor, it's a big thing. Although we know that Singapore and a number of other countries in the region are not very keen on that. For the same reasons that there were worries that once Cambodia, Laos, and those countries get in, it might give undue influence to countries like China, which are big investors in this country, in these countries. No, I don't know. I don't buy that kind of argument. I think that's a flimsy, elitist argument. I think East Timor is a vibrant democracy that has to be supported. And personally, I am for their membership. Now, nevertheless, I think what's interesting here is yung nakita natin na more emphasis by the Marcos administration for us to be more proactive dyan sa ASEAN and for ASEAN to be more proactive in dealing with dun sa iba't ibang problema. Hindi lang yung nasa Myanmar. Of course, this is a major issue. Pero also yung issue sa West Philippine Sea or South China Sea disputes. The last time, mga kameta, we had the Filipino president who was pushing for more ASEAN action, ASEAN response, ASEAN effectiveness pagdating sa West Philippine Sea and South China Sea disputes. That was President Aquino. So in a very surreal turn of events, mga kameta, we see Marcos Jr. more acting like Aquino in terms of foreign policy rather than President Duterte. And that tells you about the arc of history that tells you about the importance of what President Aquino, the late President Aquino, was fighting for, so much so that Marcos Jr. himself is continuing that legacy by pushing for more decisive action by ASEAN in the West Philippine Sea. Kanina lang, meron din kaming conversation with a good friend of mine, among others, good friend of mine, Jay Batumbakal, Dr. Batumbakal from UP Law. Please watch, of course, yung interview and discussions din namin with more and more guests dun sa show natin. No. Now, one of the interesting discussions I've had is with attorney Jay Batumbakal, Dr. Jay Batumbakal, whose PhD is really on maritime international law. The interesting thing is, Aquino's assertiveness of West Philippine Sea kind of echoed Marcos Sr.'s assertiveness on the West Philippines in the 1970s. We're not talking about democracy, human rights, economics issues domestically. We're talking about foreign policy. And in a way, Marcos Jr. is continuing both his father's legacy and Aquino's legacy by taking a stronger stance dyan sa West Philippine Sea issue and for legally binding code of conduct dyan sa West Philippine Sea. So this is a very fascinating turn of events. And it's in many ways reasonable because it's a reflection of what the Philippines needs. It's a reflection of what the ASEAN should do. And to be honest, mga kameta, I'm a personally a big fan of ASEAN in a sense that ASEAN is the most successful regional integration experience outside the West, whether North America or Western Europe. I think it's far better than what they have in GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. I mean, those countries at some point were complete at each other's. We're at loggerheads. Qatar faced, airspace ban from a number of countries in the Gulf region. At some point, if you were Qatar Airways a few years ago, you cannot pass through United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. So you have to go upwards through Iran, Russia, and then through Europe and the US. I mean, I remember that very well because I used to take that route a lot, going to the United States, passing through Qatar. So GCC, huge problems among themselves. Maybe ECOWA and Mercosur from Western Africa to Latin America kind of come close to ASEAN, but by far ASEAN is considered as the most successful regional integration experience outside the West or in the post-colonial region, far better than SAARC. There's nothing like ASEAN in Northeast Asia, kaya may ASEAN plus 3 na South Korea, Japan, China, because those three countries are at loggerheads all the time. So ASEAN has achieved a lot, and remember, ASEAN came from a very problematic base, no? 60s. We had the confrontacy when Indonesia was at war with emerging Malaysian Federation. Then later on, Singapore was kicked out of the Malaysian Federation. Philippines had conflict with Malaysia over Sabah. I mean, still there's that conflict, but it was towards armed conflict back then. So, ang gulo ng ASEAN noong time na yan, not to mention there was the Indo-China Wars. At some point, Vietnam invades Cambodia to kick out the pro-China Pol Pot regime, and then ASEAN under Lee Kuan Yew, I think Mahathir also, no, wala pa si Mahathir nun, deputy pa yata siya. So Lee Kuan Yew and Suharto sanctioned the pro-Vietnamese regime. So ang gulo ng ASEAN nung time yan. And remember, half of the ASEAN members today became members just after the end of Cold War. So it's a very young regional body. It's a regional body that has a lot of scars from the Indo-China Wars, from the Vietnam War, from the confrontacy era. There's still a Sabah conflict. There are maritime disputes between Indonesia and Malaysia. There are maritime disputes between Singapore. I'm saying like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines. That time may problema. Tapos isama mo pa yung mga gulo sa Indo-China. No? So ang dami nating conflicts in the past. We still have some of these conflicts, but we have managed to come so far in the past 4 or 5 centuries, so much so that the ASEAN can be best described as a security regime or community whereby even the threat of use of force or war as an instrument of settling intra-regional disputes is almost unthinkable. The last time 2 regional states came close to war, to blows, was the dispute over a very holy historical temple in the border of Cambodia and Thailand, but that was thankfully resolved because of the Indonesian intervention. So ASEAN has come a very, very long way of integrating extremely diverse countries. I mean, speaking of diversity, you have a country like Indonesia with 70, 80 million people and a per capita income of, let's say, $4,000. And then you have a country, mga kameta, katulad ng Brunei, which has barely a million of 670,000 people, but a per capita income which is more than 10 times that of Indonesia. Then you have Myanmar, one of the poorest countries on earth, no, with tens of millions of people. And then you have Philippines, no per capita income, $3,300, $400, and then 120 million people. So very diverse. And then politically speaking, you have parliamentary democracy in Malaysia, you have presidential democracy in Indonesia, you have presidential democracy in the Philippines, different varieties, different flavors, different problems, different imperfections, and then you don't have any democracy in the rest of ASEAN, right? Unless East Timor comes in. Thailand is a hybrid system. There's still the military there. There's still always a threat of military coup against the democratically elected government. The pro-military regime still is trying to pull off something in the upcoming elections, no matter how strong the Thaksin support base may be. And then, mga kameto, of course, you have the situation in Singapore, which is what you call electoral autocracy, because one party has been in rule, and we know what's the situation there. And then you have the situation in Vietnam, with single-party communist rule. Cambodia, essentially Hun Sen's realm, so on and so forth. No, so very diverse politically, economically levels of development, and yet we held it together. So I think ASEAN has come a long, long way in addressing some of the fundamental concerns that many post-colonial regional bodies face. No, and yet the problem is in the past 10 years, because pinipilit natin na unanimity, na dapat everyone is on board on all major issues, whether it's South China Sea, whether it's Myanmar, etc. Boom, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. And this is why I believe that ASEAN is facing an existential crisis. That is why I think it was important for the Philippines to make this intervention and say something has to be done with the Code of Conduct, with the South China Sea. Otherwise, anong ambag ng ASEAN? So as much as we have to be nice and appreciative of ASEAN's legacy throughout the decades, we also have to be very realistic that if ASEAN were to survive, if ASEAN were to thrive, if ASEAN were to assert centrality, napakamahalaga mga kameta na ASEAN will do something at least about problems in its own backyard and give up this pretension to have centrality in shaping the whole Indo-Pacific order, blah, 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 all of that. Just real talk lang mga kameta, real talk lang. Now, I'm very glad because kanina nung nag-tweet tayo about ASEAN facing existential crisis, one of the persons who commented doon and reply is Ambassador Rizal Sukma. The fact na marami mga Rizal sa Malaysia and Indonesia just tells how great Rizal was and how he was seen as a Malayan post-colonial leader. But si Ambassador Rizal Sukma was, I think, former ambassador to Britain of Indonesia, and he's one of the top think tankers and influential figures in Indonesia. He said he agreed. And I know many in ASEAN agree with me, Kameta. Many agree with me that ASEAN can do better, and if it doesn't do the better that it can do, then we're going to be in big trouble. Now, I have a set of solutions for how the ASEAN can move forward. Kasama dyan mga kameta is qualified majority voting, a system that is used in EU and Germany wants to use more in order. Essentially, it's qualified majority voting. Not all countries, I mean, first of all, you don't need unanimity, 100% everyone on board. Second, countries have voting based on their population weight. So why should, I don't know, Brunei of 500,000 people have the same voting power as Indonesia of 280 million people? That's unfair, right? And then there are issues like South China Sea, wala naman pa kayong ibang ASEAN countries, bakit sila ano pa dyan? Dapat yung mga countries lang na may interest ang involved dyan, no? So, and then not to mention, so qualified majority voting, it works well in EU. I think it should work also in ASEAN. We have a precedence of ASEAN minus X formula, or majority-based decision-making. It did wonders. For instance, we were able to pass a free trade area after CPT, free trade area within ASEAN, bringing down tariff rates to 0 to 5%, successfully, even ahead of schedule. So majority-based decision-making should be the way forward. If not, minilateralism. Minilateral meaning few key ASEAN countries should work together on specific issues of concern. We don't need all 10 ASEAN countries to be on board for us to get anything done. I think really, really that's the way forward for ASEAN. So in short, go big, or at least go bigger than what you are, or go broke. And I think that's really the problem we have in ASEAN. And to be honest, if Indonesia is not going to fix ASEAN this year or help ASEAN this year, good luck na lang sa ASEAN, because good luck na lang sa ASEAN if ASEAN is under another even more problematic member country. Indonesia is the de facto big brother. Indonesia is one of the few countries that placed ASEAN at the center of its policy agenda for quite some time. And Jokowi is you know, he showed his statesmanship and diplomatic capital last year in G20 presidency sila. So let's see what they can do this year. So I wish them the best. And I think the Philippines is doing the right thing by emphasizing the importance of ASEAN doing, you know, like going decisive and cohesive on the West Philippines issue. Otherwise, good luck na lang sa atin. Alright? Thank you very much mga kameta and talk to you soon. And alam ko, late na ngayon. O bukas nyo na panoorin yan. Okay? Thank you very much. See, mahal na mahal ko kayo. Talagang hinabol ko to. Salamat and God bless.